The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. Yeah!
Hi, and welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I start a new series with Bob Lowry, and we talk more about pH and pH buffers and ways to lower and raise your pH. We also touch on different chlorine types and saltwater systems. So in the second series of podcasts with Bob Lowry, we expand a little bit more on other aspects of your pool chemistry. And a lot of the material you're going to hear in this podcast is taught in the Certified Residential course. You can learn more about that at pcti.online. Again, that's pcti.online. And it'll take you to the website where you can find out when Bob Lowry is giving his next online certified residential course, and I highly recommend this course. So if you ever wondered why pH is such an important test factor when you're trying to balance your pool, Bob Lowry will explain that to you in this podcast. Pool Service Pro, open a Leslie's wholesale account today and receive wholesale pricing on products you use every day. Leslie's Pool Supply offers convenient locations that are open 7 days a week. Another great benefit of opening a Leslie's wholesale account is Leslie's referral program. Get referred to a customer looking for weekly pool service. Also receive priority service, enhanced rebate programs, a discount on your general liability insurance through SPA, a discount on your pool routing software through Skimmer, and an opportunity to co-brand with Leslie's on your social media, website, truck, and more. Save time and money and grow your pool service route and become a Leslie's Pro. So I'm joined by Bob Lowry, and if you're not familiar with Bob Lowry, he'll just give you a quick introduction of his background. How you doing today, Bob?
Hey, good morning. Thanks, David. Talking to you here today from Lima, Peru, where I have been a consultant and lived for 10 years. But I have a long history in the swimming pool industry. I got into the pool industry in 1973 and started a chemical company called Rhubarb that you might know about, and ROB of Rhubarb came from Robert. But in any case, shortly after that, in 77, I started a company called Leisure Time Chemical, and I invented and formulated all of their products for 8 years, and then we sold the chemical company, and I retired when I was 39 years old. And that lasted for about 3 weeks, and I started Service Industry News, that you may have heard of. And I owned that jointly with David Dickman for 6 years. And then I sold that and actually went to work for Leslie's as their technical director for 5 years or 6 years. And then after the Northridge earthquake in the mid-90s, I moved to Georgia and became a consultant. And I've been a consultant ever since. And this is my 27th year of being a consultant. I have written 21 books on pool chemistry. I was a CPO instructor for more than 20 years. I started the Pool Chemistry Training Institute, which teaches a one-day pool chemistry training course that you can take and become certified in pool chemistry. So anyway, I love talking about pool chemistry and passing along information to guys that need it and want to learn about it.
Yeah, I think there's a course coming up in February. You want to give the dates to that one?
Yeah, we have one. It's a one-day course on Saturday, and it's on February the 27th. And David will probably post a link for you, but you can go to the Pool Chemistry Training Institute or the Lowry Consulting website and find the link there. So the course is $250, and you're certified for 3 years. You do have to buy 2 books that cost about $50, and you get them from Amazon. We'd love to have you and love to teach chemistry. We have a new way to take care of pools that doesn't involve you having to buy anything. We don't sell chemicals. All we sell is education. So it's not a course where we teach how to use our chemicals. It's a course where you use the chemicals you already got. We just make a few changes to what you're already doing. And you're going to love the way it turns out because it's going to be easier, you're going to be happier, and you're going to know what you're doing.
And I think I like to look at it like these podcasts that we're recording are kind of a preview of what's covered in the course. I took the course with you, and I think a lot of the stuff that we talk about is talked about more in depth in the course, and you'll get more knowledge, of course, by taking the course itself. But today we're going to jump in and talk about something that is one of the main factors in testing, is the pH in your water, and specifically we'll talk about pH and the pH buffer. So let's why is pH such an important aspect of balancing pool water?
Well, the primary concern is well, there are two primary concerns. First of all, we want to protect the vessel and the equipment. Pools today, especially new ones, cost tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, and maintaining the wrong pH and the wrong water balance, destroys your investment. It's like buying a new car and never changing the oil. It's just not what you do. You have to keep it right. So that's one of the primary concerns. And the second concern is bather comfort. When the pH gets too high or too low, it's uncomfortable, and so you get stinging eyes, or you get not necessarily rashes, but the chlorine's not as effective at high pHs, and it can also cause chlorine to combine with other things in the water and make irritating, smelly chemicals in the pool. You can have problems when the pH is not in the proper range. So it is important. And we talk about water balance, and one of the major parts of major balance is the pH. We sometimes use what's called the Langolier Saturation Index, or LSI, to predict whether the pool is okay, scale forming, or corrosive, and we can predict that with the LSI. And one of the major constituents of the LSI is pH, alkalinity, and calcium hardness, and TDS, and cyanuric acid, and borate if you're going to use it. But so those things come into play to keep the water balanced.
And one thing I think that if you could touch on this aspect too, is that it's kind of confusing to a lot of pool professionals and homeowners alike, the fact that the pH and alkalinity are tied together. Can you explain how that relationship works between the pH and alkalinity in the water?
Yeah, they are related, and it's pretty well impossible to change one without changing the other, although it can be done. It's not necessarily impossible, but you have to do it on purpose. And so there's not a chemical that we can add to the water to raise just the pH. If you put soda ash in, it will raise the pH and the alkalinity. If you put in bicarb, it'll raise the alkalinity but not the pH. If you aerate the water, it'll raise the pH without changing alkalinity. And if you put in acid, it lowers both. So they're kind of interrelated, but the important thing is that pH needs to be in a proper range, and we want to make the pH stable. And we make the pH stable by using buffers. And there are 3 buffers in the pool. And a lot of people don't think of these water conditions as buffers, but they are. And we're trying to get people used to the idea that alkalinity and cyanuric acid, although you're used to using the terms, they are both buffers. And those 2 chemicals, those 2 water conditions, keep the pH from going down. So if we have the proper alkalinity, it'll keep the pH from going down. If we have the proper cyanuric acid level, it will also keep the pH from going down. So we can use those to buffer the pH from drifting down. We can then use a chemical called borate, or specifically boric acid or sodium tetraborate pentahydrate, at 50 parts per million, to keep the pH from going up. And so the goal then is to make pH and alkalinity stable. And by getting those in the proper ranges, we make it stable. And so the pH doesn't drift, it stays where you want it to, because you have the proper buffers in the water and the proper levels of those buffers.
Yeah, so if the alkalinity is a major part of the testing factors that we do
That's
out
right.
here.
And if the alkalinity is too low, then the pH will change every time anything happens or you add a chemical to the pool. So you won't have enough alkalinity to support the pH. And then on the other side, if you get too much alkalinity in the pool, you'll have trouble keeping the pH where you want to. It'll be difficult to change. And even though you add some acid to lower the pH goes right back up because your alkalinity is too high. So we need alkalinity in the proper level, but not so much that it makes it difficult to change, or it's so high that it pulls the pH up all the time. And we get that happening. People say, my water's balanced, but it doesn't seem to stay that way. And I go, well, why not? And they go, well, I have an alkalinity of 140 and my pH is 7.4. And while that may be close to being balanced water, the alkalinity is so high that the pH is going to keep going up all the time. And if you come there once a week, or if you're taking care of your pool once a week, then every week you're going to have to put acid in to lower the pH back down. And the fact of the matter is, you need to add more acid than normal and get the alkalinity down to the proper level. And then week to week, the pH won't change.
And there are certain pools, there are certain things that you run into out there in the real world environment where the pH is constantly rising in these pools. And you want to go over some of these factors. I know that a saltwater generator is one of them. Certain kind of water features would be another um, aspect of that. But there are a lot of people that are struggling with keeping their pH down. And sometimes it's not just the alkalinity being too high. Is that correct?
That's correct. Alkalinity is one of the major factors, but the other one is, and this is a new concept to some people, but some years ago we found out that if you have a lot of aeration in water, it raises the pH of the pool. And it does that by actually off-gassing carbon dioxide that's dissolved in the water. And a little bit of chemistry, without getting too detailed, is that there's CO2, carbon dioxide, in our atmosphere. And there's CO2 dissolved in the water in the pool. And those two are in equilibrium. And because they're in equilibrium, there's an amount of CO2 in the air and an amount in the water. And it's fixed by that equilibrium. Well, if you change the equilibrium by causing turbulence or aeration, then some of the CO2, some of the carbon dioxide that's dissolved in the pool goes out of the top of the pool, goes out of the water with the aeration and the turbulence. And so the CO2 goes out of the pool. And when it does, there are some other chemicals in the pool that are in equilibrium with the carbon dioxide. And so carbon dioxide is in equilibrium with bicarbonate, actually with carbonic acid. And carbonic acid is in equilibrium with bicarbonate. And bicarbonate is in equilibrium with carbonate. So those things are all in equilibrium in the water. And when we remove one, everything has to shift to make up for it. And when it does, in that process, we use some hydrogen. When we use some hydrogen in the water, it raises the pH, because pH is a measure of hydrogen in the pool. So when we do that, the pH goes up. So any pool that you have that has a lot of aeration, a lot of, if it has water features, waterfalls, spillways, even negative edge pools, if there's a big drop, waterfalls, any of those kinds of things where water is either falling or making turbulence. When it does, it blows off CO2 into the atmosphere, and the pH of the pool always goes up. And this is what happens in spas, as you may notice. The pH in your spa is always going up. And if you don't think that's really true, what you can do is go to the spa, measure the pH, and if it's not low, just make it low with a little bit of acid for a minute. Then turn on the blowers, turn on the jets and let it go for about 15 minutes, and then turn it off and measure the pH again. And you're going to see that the pH has probably gone from maybe 7.2 or 7.3 up to 7.8 or 8 in a period of 15 or 20 minutes. And all you did was turn on the jets. And so the same thing happens in a big pool. The more turbulence, the more aeration, the more waterfall you got going on, the higher the pH is going to be. The other reason that the pH goes up in a pool is if you have a saltwater pool, or what we call a chlorine generator in your pool, there's two things that happen inside the chlorine generator. Number one is that we make sodium hydroxide in the process of making chlorine. So as we're making the chlorine, we make some sodium hydroxide. Sodium hydroxide is also called lye. It's also called drain cleaner. And so when you make some of that, it raises the pH of the pool. So the more chlorine you make, the higher the pH of the pool is going to be. So the less chlorine that you make, the lower that it's going to be. So if you can make the pool efficient where you don't need as much chlorine, you won't be running the chlorine generator so long, and the pH won't always be going up. The other reason that the chlorine generator makes the pH goes up is that at the other electrode, we make hydrogen gas. And the hydrogen gas is a bubble. It's a gas. And then because there's a number of plates or cells inside of the chlorine generator, the water gets turbulent inside there. And then we're making a gas, and the gas and the turbulence do the same thing as I just said. Turbulence and gas make aeration, and we blow CO2 out of the pool. So that also raises the pH of the pool.
And if you have a salt cell, sorry, Bob, if you have a salt cell with a clear top, you can actually see the bubbles in there as it's producing the chlorine.
That's absolutely correct. The bubbles that are being made are not actually the chlorine gas, they're the hydrogen gas.
Huh, interesting. And so what about the surface types? I noticed that in my fiberglass pools or vinyl liner pools, the pH tends to stay really low in there versus the PebbleTech and the plaster pool. Does the surface type affect that also?
Yeah, what you have is when you have a long word, a cementitious surface, anything that's got cement in it, you're going to have the alkalinity and usually the hardness going up a little bit just due to the hydration of the plaster or the cement. And it can take a few years for that to fully hydrate. So you're always going to have that going up just a little bit, but not, it shouldn't be going up a lot. If it is, it means you've been running your pH too low and your alkalinity too low, and you're actually dissolving your pool. And in the case of a fiberglass pool, obviously, or a vinyl pool, you can't really dissolve it. So a low pH there doesn't cause as many problems as it does in a plaster pool. But a low pH will definitely cause problems with your equipment. So any metal components that are in the system, especially your heater, is made out of metal. And if you have too low a pH, it will dissolve it. It's not as much of a problem in a non-cement pool or a non-plaster pool.
Is that why during the startup process for a plaster pool, the acid demand is so high? You keep adding acid every week, and it seems like it's not affecting the pH as much. And why is it like with a new plaster, you have to add so much acid to the water?
Well, as the new plaster is curing, it actually makes calcium hydroxide, and the calcium hydroxide raises the pH of the pool. And we also get calcium carbonate in there, and the carbonate raises the alkalinity. So the two of them together end up raising the pH and alkalinity of the pool, and that's normal. That's hydration, and it's hydration of the plaster. It's typical to need a lot of acid in the beginning, but it's not necessarily good to do an acid startup, because doing an acid startup can damage your pool if you're not doing it correctly. And so if you're going to do an acid, some types of finishes actually need an acid startup. The Pebble Tech and some of those things, they actually put a coating on the top of it that they want to dissolve. And so, but those need to be done by a professional. And they have to, even professionals have to be careful not to get the pH too low, because you can cause some damage and shorten the life expectancy of the plaster.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's a good point there. And then I guess we can just mention the other pH buffer that you kind of touched on briefly was borates. And do you think
Sure.
borates are, I think, from my opinion, I think they're an ideal product to add to the pool, and I think they're an ideal buffer to go with the cyanuric acid, alkalinity, and if you have borates, then the pH is going to be much more stable with those three in the pool.
Absolutely. And I have been pushing and recommending borates for about 8 or 9 years now. I have lots and lots of information about borates on my website. I've written 5 technical bulletins on borate. But the two biggest things, everybody wants a short version. The two biggest things that you can expect to have happen with borate is, number one, it will keep the pH from going up so high and so fast. And so that's an important thing. And the second thing is that it's going to save you on chlorine. And this is going to become an important thing, especially this year. We're going to have a trichlor shortage this year. Prices are going to go up, and everybody's going to try to find ways to not use as much chlorine. And one of the things that borate does is borate is an algistat. And what that means is that it prevents algae, it doesn't kill it. So it prevents it from getting a start. Well, chlorine usually has to do that. So if we put the proper level of borate into the pool, then it will prevent algae from getting started. And if chlorine doesn't have to do it, then it's going to save you all that money that you would be spending, all that chlorine that you would be using to prevent that algae. So, and we have service techs telling us that it saves them between 30 and 50% on their chlorine bill. So that is a huge number. And the great thing is that you put it in the pool once, and then until you lose a big amount of water, you don't need to put it back. So you don't need to check it once a week. You don't need to keep adding chemicals for it or anything. You put it in the pool once, and after you've lost a lot of water, maybe in a couple, 3 months, you check it, and it might be down to 30 or something like that with backwashing or something. Or if you have a small leak, maybe it'll be down to 30 over a few months. You put it back up to 50, and a few more months, you may need some more. So it's a one-time addition. It's 50 parts per million. If you're going to use, there are 3 kinds of borate products to use. The one that I recommend is called boric acid. And when you put boric acid in the water, that's all you have to do. Put it in at 50 parts per million and you're done. But the other 2 products are sodium tetraborate pentahydrate and sodium tetraborate decahydrate. Both of those are going to raise the pH of your pool to about 9. And it's also going to raise alkalinity by about 115 parts per million. So after you add it, you're going to need to add a large amount of acid to get the pH and alkalinity back down to the normal range. So you will need in a 15,000 gallon pool about 3 to 4 gallons of acid after you add it. But if you add boric acid, you just add it and you're done. So that's a better chemical to add. There also are some products that are already neutralized when you buy them. So when you put them in, they've got a chemical already in it to neutralize it, and you put that in. So I don't have any brand names of that, but there are a couple of products on the market that are already neutralized borate products.
Yeah, we did a podcast regarding the borates and how safe they are, and how effective they are. And I just had one of my members text me and said he's going to add borates to all 80 of his service accounts because he heard that podcast, and he knows that for him that would save him a lot of money, and the customers would appreciate all the side benefits of the borate in the pool. And I think as far as the pH buffer goes, if you have a saltwater generator, it would be a no-brainer to add borates to your pool just for that reason alone. You can turn the generator down to 20 or 30% and not have all the pH rising in the pool. And it also doesn't. It also, we're going to touch on that when we talk about the saltwater systems. But I think one of the side effects too is that you're not going to get a lot of that calcium buildup.
That's right. Well, the less that it runs, the longer the life is, but also the less chance you're going to have for making deposits and getting the snowflakes and stuff like that in your pool, because it's not running as long. And that's the important thing. So we started about pH, but pH, it's all important, and it's all, as you can see, connected. pH and alkalinity and saving money and putting in the proper buffers in the water, all of that is all related. So, years ago, and in some cases still, some service techs try to take care of a pool by just measuring pH and chlorine and adjusting the pH from week to week. And all they do is dump in some acid to get the pH from near 8 back down to 7.5. And they come back next week and it's 8 again, and they put in the same amount of acid they put in last week and dump in some more chlorine. And that just isn't the way to take care of a pool. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I gotta admit, Bob, that the guy that trained me back in 1988, that's what he did. He just said, "Oh, rule of thumb: put a quart of acid in when the pH goes up this amount." And he never really instructed me on alkalinity, but that's just the old school way of thinking.
Yeah.
A rule of thumb: quart of acid a week, and that's all you need, and everything will be fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm guilty of that myself in the old days. So, but thanks for taking the time to talk about pH, and I hope you found this podcast helpful. Again, if you're looking for the certified residential course that he offers, you can go to pcti.online, and then you can go and find the courses or the course schedules that are upcoming. You can also go to my website, swimmingpoollearning.com, and on the homepage, scroll down to the center of it, and you'll see the certified residential icon right there. Click on that. That'll take you to a web page that describes it, and then you can go further and find the course. And definitely, if you're in the industry and you're starting out, or if you want to enhance your business, check out my coaching program at poolguycoaching.com. A lot of great benefits for joining there, including a discount on your general liability insurance. Again, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless. Leslie's Pool Supplies has been do-it-yourselfers and pool trade professionals' trusted partner since 1963, providing quality products and services to make pool care easy, and solutions and expertise to do it right.